Do you know what a charity is? What is it?
It's something that like takes care of something or someone.
Yeah.
Like some people.
Yeah, I think that's right.
It's something that takes care of something.
So do you have an example of that?
Like if someone who owns a charity, do I know anybody?
Not somebody that owns a charity, but just like what is like a type of charity?
Yeah.
Like what?
A charity that gives food to homeless people.
Yeah, that's a good one. Or they could give them like clothes or things like that too, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think is it important to give to other people?
Yes.
Why do you think that's important?
Because you're helping them.
Why do you think it's important to help people?
So that they can live their life.
So that they can live their life?
Yes.
Do we have to help people, or is it just like a nice thing to do?
We don't have to help them, but it would be a really nice thing to do.
Yeah?
Yes.
Why do you think it's a nice thing to do to help people?
Because you're basically giving them something so that like they can actually live.
Could be, or just make their life better, or just help them out if they're having a hard time or something, right?
Yeah.
Believe it or not, there's actually a person that I'm going to talk to, and her job is to find different people that really, really need help and then find other people to help them.
Yeah.
Does that sound like a cool job?
A little. I think the Mr. Beast job is cool though.
Well, actually, so let's talk about, so Mr. Beast it's called Beast Philanthropy, and philanthropy is a fancy word for helping people. So basically he has his main channel where he makes like all the videos that you watch, and then he has another channel that's just about helping people. Did you know that?
There's a video where he helps people, like where he paid, like they build 100 wells.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so he'll like go to different countries and maybe people don't have access to like clean water, and so then he'll build wells. So that's exactly what it's like. Anyways, I think it's something important for you to think about is just helping a friend at school that needs help. I think there's just always people that need support, and sometimes they just need a good friend, and like we have an opportunity to help make somebody's day feel a little bit better. Mm-hmm. That's pretty great, right?
Yeah.
All right. Hi, Let's Ride listeners. It's your friend Paul Estrada. If you've gotten any value out of any of the episodes, I'm here to ask you to pause this episode and take a moment to subscribe to the show wherever you're listening to this podcast. If you're a real go-getter, please take a moment to leave a review of the podcast. I'd be indebted to you forever. Thank you for supporting and listening to the show and for going on this journey with us. Pause, subscribe, and let's ride. Our guest today grew up in a world where most holidays were forbidden, music was restricted, and food insecurity was her daily reality. Yet she found the courage to run away from her home in Northern California at the age of 17 to start a new life in New York City. From navigating a childhood shaped by strict religious rules to building a career at the intersection of philanthropy, corporate giving, and community impact, she's learned how small actions, those that are seemingly too small to fail, can transform lives and communities. Her journey, shaped by her upbringing, is about resiliency, independence, and finding ways to spread love through meaningful work that uplifts others. Our guest today is Ann Canela. I've never really explained this before, but so I grew up and I was really, really into punk rock. I'm sure you could tell by my corporate demeanor and the way I dress and have clean haircuts now. But yeah, growing up, I was like really punk rock. Like in high school, I was in a punk rock band in college, and there was, so I'll have to share a video. There might be some music floating around online somewhere too, but that's for another day. And yeah, there was one band in particular called MXPX. When you listen to the podcast, that song that plays is actually by them. I was able to license the music directly from them. They're a really cool group. They're actually pretty popular in that scene. But what was fascinating to me was I didn't know exactly what I wanted the podcast to be about. And that music video for that song is basically the lead singer life starting as like a kid, like a 12-year-old kid, to getting his first car, to his first job, young adulthood, finding the love of his life, having his first kid. So it's just kind of like the natural progression of life.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really fitting for what I'm trying to do here. If you look at my logo, it's a kid with a backpack to like a young adult to an adult, with the concept just being that, what I'm trying to create and the conversations I'm just trying to have are about people progressing through life, whether you're a parent, whether you're a young adult that's trying to figure out what you want to do professionally or just how you want to live your life. You're just trying to put thoughts and ideas out there. I've learned a lot of things. I feel like maybe I'm a slow learner, or it's taking me a long time. And so if I can help expedite people's thoughts, then that's kind of, we're all here learning and doing that. So
it's also about the journey, right? It's about the journey of like the ride is so important.
That's right. That's right.
It's not the destination. It's sort of what you're learning along the way, So,
well, you're getting way deeper than how I thought about it, but yeah, I love that too. That's more or less it. So, well, hey, thank you for joining us today. I wanted to talk to you because, I've been looking at your LinkedIn posts. I've just been more fascinated with LinkedIn lately, and you just do some really fascinating things. I feel like you live this life that everybody would aspire to and want to live. Like you're just bouncing from this city to that city, and you're helping people here and helping people there. And so you just get to do some really interesting things. And I think, for all of us that, just have different jobs, but we want a component of charity or giving in our lives, just to talk to an expert about how we can go about doing that. So, but before we get to any of that, I did want to talk to you just about your upbringing and how you kind of navigated the early stages of your life to eventually get to where you are today. Where to start, right? It's a big question.
Where to start? I was going to say, I can start with, a rough sketch of my growing up, because I think that's a huge part of who I am. I am the daughter of a minister and the product. I'm a PK, if you've heard that phrase before, pastor's kid, which means
I haven't. Okay.
I grew up in a fishbowl. My dad had a fairly large church growing up and was very well known. My parents were sort of like mini celebrities in El Dorado County, which is old Gold Rush County.
And where is that?
Do a whole podcast.
Like Northern California, or what is?
Yeah, just about Northern California. Fascinating area. I was talking about the other night, and I was saying, all the hippies in that free love movement moved up north. Uh-huh. And I remember being in church, and, people were, when I was little, no one had shoes. Everyone would be barefoot. It's just a very sort of, the Jesus revolution happened. A lot of those people turned to religion. And then if I think about the arc of the religion, and then the satanic panic happened. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like, you should know about this because you're a musician. That's when like AC/DC hit and Kiss and like all of these big groups. It was sort of, there was a thread of, I think, modern Christianity that tracked with historical times. So there's a purpose to me telling you all of this. But, imagine the first AC/DC song that a parent ever heard, or like Kiss. It was a whole thing, right?
Yeah.
But in that scope of like history, my upbringing was almost like a very cult-like. That's the only way I can describe it. Very, very legalistic, and we didn't celebrate the only holidays we celebrated were Christmas and Easter. We couldn't celebrate Halloween. We couldn't listen to music. We couldn't, except for certain music. We couldn't play cards. So,
Ann, that's a big word. Like cult. That's a big word to use. When you're growing up in it as a kid, is that something you recognize, or is that something that you don't realize till later? Because that's what you know, right? Like you're in that environment. That's like what you know. Is that true? That was how that's what you knew?
It was all I knew.
Okay.
And also it's only sort of in the past few years that I've been able to even embrace that word. And I recognized it more honestly through watching, there was a documentary on the Duggars that came out on Netflix. I think it's still on there. My father followed the same religious leader, and actually it ended up being a cult. Like he was taking money from people, and it's a whole thing, but it had a set of rules where everyone's under the umbrella of the father, and then daughters are under the umbrella of the mother, and you can't step out under the umbrella. Like this is whole crazy growing up experience. I don't know why in that experience, my mother was a little bit more relaxed with me than she was with my brother. So this is going to sound odd to you, but she let me read Vogue magazine. I don't know why. And I was obsessed with it because it was my only outlook to what the rest of the world looked like. And then she let us go to the library and she didn't edit our books. So we could get any book we wanted at the library. So I would come home with a stack of books. And so, of course,
when you see that Vogue magazine, right, that's I'm assuming such a divergence from what you're living and experience. So how did you reconcile that, or how did that play out in your head? You're like, okay, I'm seeing this one thing in a magazine, but I'm living this other thing. Like, how did you reconcile that?
I would look at the advertisements and it was my version of television. I would just imagine myself in that city, in that wearing those clothes or, whatever it was. There's also great writing in there, eating that food. And I just lived through that until I was about 17. And then I upped and ran away to New York City.
So at 17, you went from Northern California to New York City.
I did.
So tell me about that. So, I'm assuming that's not a decision you just make on a whim overnight. So was that like something that was like planned over time? And then,
yeah.
So that's one. And then two, like how the heck do you actually
do that?
Yeah.
If my daughter did that now, I would chase her down.
I bet. I bet you would.
The more I grew, the more I learned, the more I educated myself, the more I knew that I needed to get out of the situation I was in, because what I saw around me, especially for women, was women that did not work and a lot of families that were stuck in this poverty cycle. And even my own family, my father had this calling, but the calling was anything that he got, he gave away. So we experienced a lot of food insecurity, which really informed some of the work I'm doing now. I know what it's like to go into the cupboard and see like, oh, there's a 25-pound bag of rice and like a huge bag of uncooked beans. Like what am I supposed to do with this at 12? I think just all of those experiences together, I realized I needed to, if I was going to break the cycle of how women were showing up in our family, I needed to leave the county. I needed to get out of Northern California. And I think New York was the farthest place. I never really wanted to go to New York City. Like, wasn't like, there's some kids that just like pine, but it was just the farthest place away I could think of. And I saw it in these magazines all the time. And I just thought, yeah, I'll do that.
So before we actually get into you moving on, there's a lot we got to unpack there. And so the first thing, just talking about the food insecurity part, you said your father was a pastor, and so there's a lot of giving involved, but to the extent that there was barely enough, it sounded like, for his own family. And so Were you going to public school as well, or some sort of school, or you're being homeschooled?
No, my dad started a private school at his church. So, and it followed the same rules as the religion. So my early education was all based on this same protocol of, and religious viewpoint. So I didn't have the best education in that sense. And then when we moved and my dad started another church, they homeschooled my brother and I. And that was basically my high school years.
Okay.
Which was really, really hard for me.
So again, when you're kind of in this bubble, but you have this magazine to kind of grab onto where you're kind of getting a sense of what life could be like, or how life exists differently outside of your bubble.
Yeah.
So when you're experiencing, let's say, food insecurity, because it's what it's the environment that you're in, does that like get normalized, or is it constantly like, no, wait, there's something wrong. This doesn't totally feel right.
I think when you're a kid, you don't know better, but also I had other friends, other family members. I knew that my dad wasn't around as much, and that when we were specifically me, when I was trotted out, it was to make a good impression. I think when you're a kid, you know that your life is not like others. And, if you're surrounded by other teenagers, like say in the youth group or whatever, you understand like their families are much different than yours. You kind of intuitively feel it, but you don't recognize it. I think like I didn't recognize it until I was an adult and really had to grapple with what had happened as a child, So there comes a point where you don't realize how much this is a double negative. You realize how little you've learned, you know?
Okay, right. But it almost seems like there's like they say, ignorance is bliss, right? So almost in a way, because you were sheltered, and you kind of didn't know any better, like even though what you're, later on you could recognize like, okay, well, this wasn't great. Like food insecurity wasn't great, and not being educated as well wasn't great. But because you were like in the middle of it, it sounds like maybe that wasn't as big of a issue, or am I getting that right or no?
I think there were some benefits to the way I live my life now. I can definitely see, for example, I didn't really have a sense of hierarchy and authority. So, I mean, this is just a very good example. So if I work for somebody that has a lot more money than I will ever see in my lifetime, it doesn't matter to me. I just see them as a person. And that has served me well in my career. So there's certain things that I think were beneficial about being raised in an unorthodox manner. It provides you with maybe a different level of thinking than other people bring to the conversation.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
And not only that, but maybe like more empathy. I would think a lot more empathy, actually. Like once you start working and getting to know those people that find themselves in the situation that you've lived. One of the things I think about with, raising kids, for example, is, we are fortunate that we've got a roof over our head. We have food in our pantry. We have, we can put them through good school. They can play sports. They're clothed, right? Like all their necessities are met. And there's almost the other end of the spectrum, which is, those that maybe have too much and then they lose a sense of empathy or gratitude for, just
what they have.
Just things, right? So it's kind of like, it kind of goes both ways in a sense, but because you've lived, in that side, I would imagine you can connect with people in a much more meaningful way and really understand where they're coming from and what, like the help that they need, basically.
Definitely. 100% agree with all of that. And I will add that I came out of my childhood like a sieve. Do you know what I mean? Or like, I don't know, Swiss cheese or a sponge on if I were to sort of draw a spectrum, a sponge on the best day, absorbing everything around me, learning as quickly as I could. On the worst day, just full of holes, where everything sort of washed through me and I had no boundaries and I didn't know how to create boundaries, but then also sort of learning at a rapid rate. So, and forcing myself into that by moving to, the biggest city in the United States.
So let's go there. So we got off track, but we had a great conversation.
No, it's good.
But you make your way, you say, okay, so you go as far away as you possibly can. You go to New York City, which is probably the complete opposite of everything this is like everything, like the senses, I'm sure were
oh my gosh,
out of control, right? So like, what was that like first, I don't know, month or so like of just like getting acclimated to this completely different surrounding?
It was wild. I don't know if I remember my first glimpse of the city, but I certainly remember my first day because I didn't have a job and I was basically sleeping on a friend's couch, who had moved there. And my intention was just to go and visit, but then I quickly realized I was going to stay for a while. So my first order of business was to get a job. One of the things that I think growing up, one of the ways I got out is I started working at 14. I was out and working and feeding myself. And, I learned to take care of myself pretty quickly.
Okay.
And so I got a job. I think by the time I turned 17, I was waiting tables and a pretty nice restaurant. And so I had an introduction from one cook to the other into a restaurant in New York City. If
I had to summarize what I'm hearing so far, it's that, even though you may have had challenges associated with your upbringing, you had some personal drive. I'll tell you right now, if I'm 17 years old, going across the country, the first thing I'm not thinking about is getting a job and signing up for college. Like that's certainly probably nowhere near my radar. I'm going and, goofing around for at least for a while until I can. So I think there's something really significant there that is important to lean onto. And then also just like figuring out like this level of independence it seems like you have, like even though you're in this bubble, there was some foundation that was established that provided you with a skill set that was going to allow you to be successful inside or outside of that bubble. So that's what I just heard.
That's lovely.
Yeah? Okay.
Okay. And I think it rings true to me.
Uh-huh.
It rings true. Of course, I'm Gen X too, so we were let to run wild. And then There's built-in independence to growing up in the 80s.
I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but
Okay.
I think we're understanding certainly like who you are and where you're coming from, and getting into your career a little bit. Did you start straight into the corporate giving environment, or like how did your career start?
And so one of the organizations that we partnered with was this International Women's Association. They invited me sort of onto their advisory board, into discussions about how they were working within the city to, create more opportunities for diverse young people, to provide on-ramps into, good education, good jobs, all that sort of thing. And that started opening up my eyes to the fact that there are these opportunities to both do good and do well, so that opportunity is to be influential, and then also to sort of start to marry, well, how does that impact the business? So the sort of brand social impact partnerships, and then also my experience of giving personally, I think that was the beginning of the transformation for me.
That makes sense. And so, looking at your LinkedIn, I mean, you spent a lot of time in marketing, communications. I'm seeing different roles. Like you mentioned Chicago, I see DC in here. And then, it looks like there was kind of like this pivot. Well, it sounds like you were doing that, but then like you really went deep, like starting in around 2017. I'm seeing Philanthropy University, and then it kind of goes down this path from there. I think for a lot of us, that especially if you grow up in just a normal area, much less an affluent area, you might see things or hear about things, but it feels so far away. Like you feel so detached from that. I think it's hard, like as a human, to sympathize or even like understand or try to put yourself in those people's shoes, because you're so far, like water insecurity. Like, man, like I have 3 faucets here. I can get fresh water, right? And so like it's kind of hard to connect those dots, I think. And what interesting thing that I'm seeing is kind of what you just described is there's all this social media influence out there, these days, and some of them are doing video games and just joking around or things like that. And there's others that are actually very, very famous for literally going up to people in a Walmart or just somewhere on the street, somebody that's asking for money, and literally changing these people's lives. And what's fascinating to me about that is they do it kind of in this I see the most common one is like they try to get people to be kind to them first without knowing that they're going to get something per se, right? So they, I know this one guy that might go up and just ask somebody that you could tell is in need for something, but he's asking them for something, and then they give him something, and then he gives them their money back and then some, right? Like $500 or something. And then that turns into like these campaigns online where GoFundMe's and things like that, where literally this guy can go back the next day with the check for $50,000 that was crowdfunded by a bunch of strangers that just connected with that story of something that they saw because they were scrolling through their phone and saw a 1-minute reel and connected with that story in that short amount of time. So I know I just kind of went off on something there, but it sounds like you know what I'm talking about.
I do.
And just like this idea of like, how do we get people to connect more to those things? Because I feel like if we could do that, then raising money and helping becomes like simple, from what I can tell.
It's one of the joys of the work that I get to do now. And it is really hard. And it's common, right? It's really hard to connect to kids in Africa, to be honest. Like, how is that relevant to me? You have to have a special sort of passion, perhaps. But when you see something closer to your home, it's different. I think truly the biggest changes that can happen in the world happen at the local level, in your community, right where you are. And while I appreciate the idea of being able to give someone $50,000 to change their life, and maybe you did connect with them, I would like to be a catalyst for local actions that literally are too small to fail. That's sort of my passion. And to me, that means that you are demonstrating love. I think of love as an action, and it's also sort of my personal platform. I think that my purpose in the world is actually to spread love. And at a local level, love is kind of one of these phrases that's thrown around a lot, like you're falling in love, or you love this, or I love ice cream. That's not what I mean. I mean, really paying attention and caring about uplifting another person is an act in itself of love.
When you said local, it triggered something for me. And that is, I've lived in the same neighborhood for 10 years. I've seen the same 3 homeless people almost that whole time. Like I know where they hang out. I know where they're going to be in certain parts of the day. Like they follow this like rhythm. And, when I can, let's say there's one at this stoplight all the time that I see, and you can roll down your window. I could give them a $5 bill. I've literally, if you wanted me to describe this person's face, I could do that. I've seen them that many times. Right. And I can give them $5 and I can then go about my day and do what I got to do. I don't know where that $5 is going. I'm not creating a human connection with that person. I feel like I'm helping them, and it gives me maybe this very quick like moment of like, hey, okay, I'm helping you. But then I always find myself thinking, okay, but I don't know what you're doing with that $5. I don't know where you're going to go spend the night tonight. And I've seen you here for years. So clearly things aren't changing or getting better for you. And so then part of me is just like, well, am I actually even helping at all? Or are we doing nothing?
Homelessness is one of the hardest. It's the hardest to get at from a issue area. It's also the hardest to raise money for, because people have that exact, like, what am I doing? How is this helping? They get so overwhelmed by it, they become apathetic, but it's such an epidemic in the world.
Well, it's just something where you want to see the change. Like, and that's like, when I go back to, it's like one of the great things about some of these philanthropists is like, they're not just giving these people money. It's like, you think about that phrase, like, you give somebody a fish or you teach them to fish, right? Yeah, I can give you $5, but like, if that is just like that same problem presents itself the next day and the next day and the next day, versus like, you see some things now where it's like, okay, I'm going to help you with your immediate needs. But, I know this other guy in South America was like, I'm going to set you up with a small business. You're going to have a little store. And so you're going to kind of become self-sufficient. I gave you a little bit of a push and nudge to get you set up. But now I can turn my eyes and walk away to the next problem that I have to solve and feel like, okay, I didn't just temporarily solve this problem. Right. I hope I just solved it for this family for the foreseeable future. And I think like maybe that's like where people are trying to like connect those dots.
There's a question I think I always ask at the beginning of trying to solve any problem, which is, number one, can money solve this? Because sometimes that's not the answer. Philanthropy isn't always the answer to everything. Sometimes money is not the issue. Sometimes it is that the person is bipolar and or has some other mental health issues. And despite all of the things that you do around that one person, you may not be able to impact that person. Now, you can go to your local homeless shelter and you can say, hey, I keep seeing these 3 people. I'm sure you guys know them. Is there anything we can do to help and get them off the street? Is there anything that you need? Can I provide you blankets? Can we do some food drives? Like, at least then they are aware of the people that you're seeing, and they will be best suited to provide an intervention of however they see it fit. Like, I definitely go through the experts, right? Rather than handing out the money. Also, I think that you have an opportunity to consider, is this the highest need in your community? What other issues are there? Sort of getting engaged and understanding that is of importance. And sometimes it might not be in your community, but it might be the community next to you, where, you're in this affluent community, not you necessarily, but you might be. I see this in the work I do now, like some of the plants where we are in really good communities, but right next to them is a community that is suffering. So that's where we'll go. I think it's kind of the same with individual choices. I don't recommend handing money out to people on the street. I don't recommend trying to create a personal connection with somebody. I recommend doing that under the expertise of the local whatever, or the state whatever, or the homeless shelter, the food pantry, those are the people that are going to be there sustained for the long term. And you may not be. These guys are trying to set these people up with a small business. It may look glossy and it may succeed, but it may not. And then that goes away. And where does that leave that person? I'm much more interested in that sustained support.
And I see too, when you talk about those communities, it's if you put out a call, right, to people and just say, hey, guys, we found this opportunity to help people and we need people to volunteer and come support. I need you to put together these things. I need you to pass out this stuff. I need you to clean up this speech, whatever the case may be, people like we're inherently good people. And I think you have no problem getting armies of people to come support those efforts. And again, when I think about that, and I feel like I'm being pessimistic, I'm not trying to be, but it's like people are good. They want to help. They almost need like a nudge to be like, hey, there's this specific thing at this specific time, and people will show up for that. And I guess what I'm trying to get at is, how do we kind of create that mentality in our everyday lives? Not just something that we're doing once a month or once a quarter or something like that, but something that like we are making a part of our everyday life.
Well, what I see is, in my work now in corporate philanthropy, in corporate giving, is I literally have a platform where I can engage thousands of volunteers on an annual basis. And I think last year it was a couple thousand volunteers that came out, but this year it's going to be exponentially more. And what I feel is transformative is when you provide experiences and connections to the community that are authentic and real, and you allow for the magic of volunteering to happen. And I have heard from some of my team members, like, I'm still on the high from volunteering 2 days ago. This completely transformed the way I think about XYZ. And there's intentional strategies on how you even think about that from designing a volunteer experience. So like most things, in order to sort of impact someone in their daily life, you have to be thoughtful and strategic about how you do it. So I think what I'm hearing you say, and the way I think about it, is it's less transactional, meaning like, I'm just going to show up on Easter and Christmas. I'm going to like be in the food pantry on an ongoing. You're moving it from transactional to transformative.
Yeah, you're saying it much more eloquently than I am. But yeah, that's basically what I'm getting at, which is like, okay, it's great to go to your local food bank and on Thanksgiving and go help serve meals, and that does feel good, and it is needed, right? So I'm not discouraging people from doing that. Like, go do those things. But again, it does feel a little like, again, and in my mind, it's like, okay, well, I just helped this person for this particular day, but I'm not getting to the root. Again, maybe that's me as like a corporate, right? Our corporate minds are like, what's the root cause? How do I get to right? I'm doing this surface level stuff that's not really doing anything. Like, that's how maybe I'm the exception, but like, that's how I feel about it. I feel like I'm probably not alone completely in that way of thinking. But yeah, just trying to figure out how to incorporate that more into our everyday life. And again, for me as a parent, right? How do I instill that sense in them early on too, so that just becomes a normal part of their life and not just something when Ann emails me and says, hey, I need some help on this today.
Well, I mean, it takes all of these things. So, a great example, Saturday in California is our ocean cleanup day. And we have 50 plus volunteers showing up, and they're bringing their families. So, corporate philanthropy is, or having a volunteer experience, engaging employees at work, is a platform and is a way to start plugging in. And it's a wonderful way to start plugging in, because it's so much more than just the volunteer work. It's volunteer work, plus you get to engage with team members that you're not normally engaging with. Plus you might get exposure to leadership. Plus it's aligned with the business. Like, there's so many reasons why corporate philanthropy and corporate volunteerism is a really good place to start. And then when you can, bringing your kids to that, they can begin to see what it's like to be in a company that does good. And so there is that piece, but I wouldn't discount these other small actions, the showing up on Thanksgiving. What I would say is every little thing, every little step, every opportunity, even just to lift up someone's day, to say like, hey, how are you? Or your barista at Starbucks, like, hey, you look great today. Or, what'd you do this weekend? Anything. You just never know how impactful that is going to be. From someone that actually had to stand in line to get a turkey at a food bank so that we could celebrate Thanksgiving, it's needed. If that didn't come, we wouldn't have had those Thanksgivings.
So I think, Ann, what I just heard you say is that I'm a selfish person, because basically what I just described is why I'm so like frustrated by it, is because I do that and I don't feel satisfied with what I provided that day. But what you just told me is like, yeah, but shift your mentality. Instead of thinking about yourself and how that experience went for you, think about that other person and how that felt for them. So that's what I just learned from that.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I didn't call you selfish.
I did. That's why I know
you're ambitious, not selfish. You're ambitious. And I mean, look, you're thinking at it from a systemic point of view, which is, it is very, you're trying to solve the problem. Mm-hmm. Not any one person is not going to solve the problem of food insecurity. It's going to take all of us together, pushing at the right places, looking at food waste, recovery of things that farmers are leaving behind. Like there's a bunch of things, right? Actually getting out into the community and handing out food. All of these things together, that's one issue, but that issue is also tied to lack of affordable housing, and it's tied to economic development. And so none of this is easy stuff, but that is why there are simple things that we can all do, and why I'm really on this local action, small actions that are too small to fail. So if I think about the environment, a great way to engage with an environmental cause that is literally, you will never fail doing this, is when you see a piece of litter on the street, pick it up.
Pick it up, yeah.
And if it's recyclable, hey, recycle it.
Yeah.
Every time you go out for a walk, just look, don't walk by that piece of trash. If we all did that every day in our lives, that is an action that literally you cannot fail at.
It's funny, I'm smiling as you're saying that, because I have this debate with myself often where I see a piece of trash and I'm like, oh, that sucks. Like that's there. And I'm like, should I pick this up? But it's pretty dirty. And like,
from now on.
And I think like half the time, I'm going to say maybe half the time I do pick it up. And I'm like, yeah, that was a very small thing, but I do think, and maybe somebody saw that and they got inspired to do. So it's small. Yeah, I get it. But yeah,
it is small. But imagine every person on earth picking up that piece of trash and recycling it to be recycled.
Yeah.
Or even just everyone in your community doing it. Your community is starting to actually invest in itself and showing up with consistent action that demonstrates what I would call love.
Yeah. And it actually goes back to what I was saying about those social media people doing these crowdfunding campaigns. Like you're talking about somebody raising $50,000, but it's not like some, big major philanthropist or organization cutting that $50,000. That's like, I don't know, 25,000 people donating $2. Yes, like, I think you could give $2 and that's not going to really move the needle on your budget. But because 25,000 people all made that same decision, you just impacted this one individual in a massive, like life-changing way.
Yeah. So I think finding the causes that you are passionate about, thinking about consistent small actions to begin with is a great way as an individual to get started in basically changing the world. And I think to myself, and I tell, my kids, and I'll say, every time you pick up that cigarette butt, which is, full
You're pushing it, Ann. You're pushing it the same. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead. All right. Go ahead.
Full of it was like the worst thing that you find on the beaches in California, right? And you are part of changing the planet. You're keeping that out of the ocean. You're keeping it out of, all of our waterways. Every time you pick up a water bottle and recycle it, as we know, they're 100% recyclable. You are impacting the planet. And that can layer up then, right? So then you have this experience where like, oh, I did this ocean cleanup. Oh, wait a minute. What's this organization, Heal the Bay? Oh, maybe if I gave them $1 every week, that would be something that could actually complement what I'm doing as I volunteer. It just kind of ladders up. So I think that's the way I would approach it.
Well, that's a complete shift, because if you hear what I said 20 minutes ago was I'm really frustrated because I can't systemically solve this massive problem that hundreds of thousands of scholars and people have tried to solve in the past. And instead you're saying, hey, yeah, well, you know what? That's not really what's needed. It's just doing this one little act and doing it maybe a couple times a day, and then getting your friend and getting your neighbor to do that same thing. And then, you know what? Like we do that enough times and you will start to move the needle on some of these areas, as opposed to trying to put together this business plan and executive strategy about how we're going to solve this extremely complex problem that can't be done that way.
Well, I'll tell you, this was a hypothesis of mine, and because of the nature of what I get to do in my daily work, I was able to test it. And we invested in some behavioral research, which was, literally people following other people around saying, why do you put that in why do you put your recycling bin here? And why, when you go out for a walk and you saw that piece of litter, why didn't you pick it up? And what would move you to pick it up? And anyway, we ended up launching a campaign in Austin that was focused on actions that were too small to fail. We increased civic pride by 15%. We increased recycling by somewhere around 11 or 12%, which is huge. We increased confidence in what went to landfills. We increased education, all of these things by double-digit numbers because people felt like they could see themselves in the bigger problem and saw themselves as connected to it. And that campaign's now in San Diego. But I think there's real power in local action, whether that's, and it doesn't have to be obviously environmental, whether that's, look, every time I see this homeless person for the next, 6 months, I'm going to hand them a bottle of water, which is something that you, Paul, could do.
Yeah, 100%. I have access to that. That's fair. All right. So don't invite them to my house for dinner per se. Okay. Got it.
No.
Go through the proper channels and I will do that. I want to wrap up with this. And that is, I think, we're here near the end of September. We're going into, the Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I feel like that's like a really big, it tends to be a really big push for, I feel like a lot of these different types of efforts. And so I feel like the timing of this conversation is really, really good. For those that maybe don't work at a company that is deliberate in how they engage with their team members to get involved in these sorts of things, like what do you recommend for those people that don't have an Ann Canela telling them where they should go spend their time? Like how should they go about identifying opportunities and getting involved? Yeah,
there's a number of ways. So look to your local YMCAs is a good example. Local churches, local business clubs, local chamber of commerce. There's a number of ways that you can find the sort of influential organizations. I say influential, meaning they'll have opportunities where you can engage. And I think a lot of those are the ones that naturally surround your community. There's also there's platforms online that are volunteer focused. If you want to, you could probably literally Google volunteer in my area and a number of them would pop up. But also local churches, if I didn't say that, are a great place to start. Food pantries don't just need food donations. They need people to come in and organize for them all the time. The food pantries are a great place to just say, hey, I want to volunteer. They need, especially those that have big dining rooms, they need people to come in and maybe paint, mop the floors, clean up things, organize. If they have a closet, organize the closet. And then the other thing I would say is if you're going to donate, if you're going to think about throwing things away, please think about donating them. And then also consider organizations like Toys for Tots. And, one of the things that I always think about and love is if we're going to give back, if we're going to volunteer, can we also add joy at the same time? Can we actually surprise somebody? So, a lot of kids don't get toys at Christmas or holidays. So think about the kids during that time, because I certainly was one of those and appreciated those efforts. And if all fails, just pick up a piece of trash and know that that's actually having an impact too. So do that anyway. Do it anyways. Guys, go right now. Push pause on this and go do it. No, I'm just kidding. But Ann, thank you so much. Like I said, I believe all people are inherently really good people. And sometimes it's just a matter of convenience, right? It's like, I don't know exactly. No one's telling me exactly where to go and what to do. And so I think, what you just gave us is everybody can, with just like a tiny bit of effort, go do something. And then, hey, what you're doing might seem really small in nature, but it's actually part of, thousands or tens of thousands of other people doing the same thing that, believe it or not, is moving the needle. And so I think that's important too. So thank you so much for having me on. Really appreciate it. I enjoyed it too, Ann. And so best of luck. Seems like you're going to be a very busy lady here to finish the rest of the year. And you can expect a email from me to sign up for one of your upcoming events. All right. Thanks so much. All right, Ann. We'll talk soon. Thank you. Bye. The Rockies ain't too far from here if we drive all night.